They say ignorance is bliss, but I've learned the hard way that ignorance can also be a slow death, an erosion of trust and sanity that leaves you questioning everything. My name is Ethan, and this is the story of how my seemingly perfect life unraveled when I discovered the truth about my wife, Amanda. We'd been married for 8 years. Amanda was the love of my life, my anchor, my partner in every sense of the word. She worked as a graphic designer, freelancing for various companies, which gave her the flexibility to work from home most of the time. I always admired her creativity and her dedication to her craft, but it was that very flexibility that became the veil under which she hid her betrayals. It started with a change in her behavior. Subtle at first, a few more hours spent on her phone, a giggle at messages she wouldn't share with me, and a sudden interest in dressing up more than usual for her client meetings. I brushed it off initially. After all, everyone needs their space, right? But the nagging feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. One evening, as she was in the shower, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. I'd never had the urge to invade her privacy before, but something about the way she'd been guarding her phone lately made my hands itch. I picked it up and unlocked it. We'd always known each other's passcodes. The message was from someone named Greg, a name I didn't recognize. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow, room 407. My heart dropped. I stared at the screen, trying to make sense of what I was reading. Who was Greg? Why was he meeting her in a hotel room? My mind raced with questions, each more damning than the last. When Amanda came out of the shower, I played it cool. I didn't confront her right away. I needed more information. That night, while she slept, I went through her phone more thoroughly. There were messages, photos, and nude pictures, sent to Greg, received from Greg. My stomach churned as I scrolled through the evidence of her betrayal. The next day, I called in sick to work. Amanda left the house in a rush, claiming she had a meeting with a new client. I followed her, my heart pounding as I tailed her car from a safe distance. She drove to a downtown hotel, the same one mentioned in the text. I parked across the street and watched as she entered the building, her phone in hand and a smile on her face that I hadn't seen in months. Unable to bear the suspense, I went into the hotel lobby. I told the receptionist I was meeting a friend in room 407 and asked if they could confirm the room's occupant. It was Greg Sanders. My blood boiled as I thanked the receptionist and walked out. My suspicions were no longer suspicions. They were facts. I decided to dig deeper. Greg Sanders wasn't just anyone. He was one of Amanda's college friends. I found his social media profile easily enough. He'd recently divorced, and his posts were a mix of gym selfies and philosophical quotes about second chances and new beginnings. The more I read, the angrier I became. This was the man she'd thrown our marriage away for? I knew I needed proof beyond the texts and photos if I wanted to confront Amanda, and if things escalated, I'd need more than just circumstantial evidence. I hired a private investigator to gather concrete details. It felt extreme, but I needed the truth, no matter how ugly it was. Over the next week, the investigator uncovered a series of hotel meetups, explicit messages, and even a trail of money transfers from Amanda to Greg. When he showed me the photos of them together, holding hands, kissing in public, I felt a mix of rage and heartbreak so intense it was almost paralyzing. But there was more. The investigator discovered that Greg had a history, a police record for fraud and blackmail. It was then that I realized this wasn't just an affair. This was something darker. Greg wasn't just using Amanda for physical pleasure. He was extorting her. The money transfers weren't gifts, they were payments. I confronted Amanda that evening. She walked into the house, her face lighting up in a fake smile that I now recognized as a mask. "We need to talk," I said, my voice cold and steady. Her smile faltered. "What about?" I laid the evidence on the table, printouts of the texts, the photos, the financial transactions. Her face went pale as she sat down, her hands trembling. "How long has this been going on?" I demanded. She looked at me, tears streaming down her face. "Ethan, I'm so sorry. I didn't know how to tell you. He's been blackmailing me." "Blackmailing you?" I asked, incredulous. She nodded, sobbing. "He has pictures. From when we first started talking. I was stupid, Ethan. I sent him things I shouldn't have, and now he's threatening to send them to everyone, my clients, my family, you." My mind raced. On one hand, her story explained the money transfers and her obvious distress. On the other hand, she had willingly entered into this mess. She had betrayed me. "Why didn't you come to me?" I asked, my voice cracking. "I was scared," she whispered. "I thought I could handle it. I didn't want you to hate me." The next few days were a whirlwind. I contacted the police, presenting them with the evidence I had gathered. They launched an investigation into Greg, focusing on his history of blackmail and fraud. Amanda cooperated fully, providing her phone and bank records as proof of his threats. Meanwhile, I tried to come to terms with my feelings. The betrayal cut deep, but so did the realization that Amanda had been manipulated and victimized. I wasn't sure if I could forgive her, but I also couldn't deny the part of me that still cared for her. The police arrested Greg a week later. During their interrogation, he admitted to targeting Amanda, using their shared history to gain her trust before coercing her into sending explicit photos. Once he had the material, he threatened to ruin her life if she didn't comply with his demands. The case went to court, and Greg was sentenced to prison for extortion and harassment. Watching him led away in handcuffs should have brought me some relief, but instead, I felt empty. The damage was done. My marriage was in tatters, and I didn't know if it could be salvaged. Amanda and I attended counseling in the months that followed. She was remorseful, doing everything she could to rebuild my trust. But trust, once broken, isn't easily repaired. I found myself pulling away from her, unable to look at her without seeing the betrayal. One night, after another argument, she broke down. "I know I can't undo what I did," she said, her voice trembling. "But I love you, Ethan. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make this right if you'll let me." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to go back to the way things were before Greg came into our lives, but deep down, I knew that things would never be the same. In the end, I made the hardest decision of my life. I filed for divorce. It wasn't because I didn't love her. I did. But love wasn't enough to erase the pain, the mistrust, the lingering doubt. I needed a fresh start, a chance to rebuild my life on my terms. As I signed the papers, I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. The chapter of my life with Amanda was over, but a new one was beginning. And though the road ahead was uncertain, I knew one thing for sure: I'd never let myself be blindsided like that again.